Welcome. I am very pleased that today we can tackle a very important topic, namely the risks that are posed by AI to children and young people, and that we have experts available to talk about some of the measures that we can take to mitigate those risks. So we have researchers here from two different institutions. Ron Ivey and Jonathan Teubner are from the Harvard Human Flourishing Program down the street. And Nathanael Fast and Ravi Iyer are from the USC Marshall School of Business, Psychology of Technology Institute. And both of these organizations do very relevant work to the topic of our seminar series, our regular two-weekly seminar series on how we may design AI to advance people and support human flourishing. So Ron and colleagues, please take it away.
Thank you, Patty. And excited to be here with everyone. We're like all big fans of the Media Lab and what you all are doing with this program. So excited to be here and participate in this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation and make sure you guys can all see it. Can everyone see it? Great. Yes. Yeah. So as Patty said, we're excited to talk to you all about this topic of AI and its impact on youth, both the positive and negatives, and really I think the bulk of the last part of the conversation, we are going to walk through some principles and some potential ideas for design. But really, we'd want to make sure we have enough time to have a discussion with you all on those principles and those ideas related to the design of the chatbots. This has been really a series of many conversations over the last year. We'll talk more about that, but we really want to make sure there's time to get into that discussion so that we can get your feedback. If you kind of the TLDR for those of you that have interacted with the technological world in terms of the investor tech space, too long didn't read. This would be the too long didn't listen. Would be the summary of this slide. Summary of the slides. We're really here to talk about how our choices at multiple levels of either the AI systems, the businesses themselves, and markets in terms of investors or customers, policy at the political systems, and then at the cultural and social systems in terms of values, beliefs, science. There are choices that we all have to make, either as in our professions or in our own lives. And that's really what we're here to talk about. What's at stake? What we're really focused on here is that close social relationships, in terms of our research, is really essential to human flourishing. We'll talk more about what, how that plays into the chatbot question. We're seeing a worrying trend of declining social connectedness, and especially among youth. And this preceded the rise of chatbots, but AI chatbots are kind of playing right into that trend and that issue. Could have benefits, but we're worried it might have more risks related to those challenges, and that could have serious negative health impacts on AI, on youth and their futures. So that's really the top line. What we're going to talk about today. I'll introduce my colleagues, and then they'll give them a chance to kind of talk about the different programs. But it's been really fun to work with Nate and Jonathan and Ravi. Jonathan had a chance to work with for the last 4 years, has an incredible background in the humanities space and the social sciences, and now also as a CEO of a successful AI company. So brings the dual nature that we're working with in terms of these two topics. Nate and Ravi are at USC Marshall, and Nate is a professor. And really, I've learned a lot from him on the kind of the power dynamics of play and the systemic drivers of these issues. And then Ravi has a former background in the tech world and has really been kind of introducing me to new insights about how these products are designed, So it's just been a real delight to work with all four of them. I'll let Jonathan give more background on the Harvard Human Flourishing Program, and then Nate and Ravi can share about USC.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Thanks for giving us a part of your afternoon or whatever time it is in your time zone. So the Human Flourishing Program, based at Harvard's Institute for Quantitative Social Science, has really kind of two missions. One is the study and promotion of flourishing, human flourishing. And the second is a kind of more of an methodological desideratum. And that would be to like find some way to get social sciences and humanities to collaborate much more substantively on big issues. And so that's what we've been doing. The Human Flourishing Program since 2016 was founded by Tyler Vanderweel, a professor of epidemiology in the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard. And our flagship research project that we have that's currently ongoing is the Global Flourishing Study. And it's the largest global study of this kind with 240,000 participants over 22 countries. And we're doing five waves on that. We've collected the first two and doing the analysis. The data on the first wave is all out, came out in a set of papers in the Nature family, and then as well as now we're kind of looking at wave 2 data, and we'll have wave 3 in the new year as well. So we're kind of looking forward to that, and that is already a resource for other people to get access to that data. And we're looking, so you can go to the next slide.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit about the Neely Center for Ethical Leadership. So we know there's a lot of leaders out there who are wanting to make a positive difference and really align AI with human flourishing and with human-centered values. And so to help those leaders do that, we develop tools, data, generate data, and build networks to help them in that work. And we work with lots of different partners across academia. So we work with different research labs across different universities on research projects. We work with our partners in industry, individual technologists, as well as tech companies, and also NGOs and others in civil society. And we really take a systems approach. And so if you look at the different levers, Donella Meadows, levers for change within a system, at the very top is a paradigm. And so we're trying to shift a paradigm away from a profit-driven approach to developing AI and instead have a purpose-driven approach. And not just in words, but also in metrics and all the way throughout the stack and all the different stakeholders. And so we're trying to create tools and projects that help the ecosystem embrace a purpose-driven paradigm. And so we have things, we inform policy and design with design codes. And so we have a social media design code that's already informed policy and has influenced companies, privately in our personal relationships with them. They've been adopting some of those design recommendations. And then we also have a social AI design code that we're going to be talking with you later today about and try to get your feedback as well. And so Ravi will guide you through those principles. We also have the Neely indices, ethics and technology indices. So we track user experiences, and this is a nationally representative sample of adults in the US where we track their experiences across social media and AI. But we're very excited. We've just created an index for youth, a representative sample of youth ages 13 to 17 in the US. And we're tracking their experiences across social media and also with new AI models, LLMs, and so on. And so we'd love to partner with you if you want to kind of help get involved in those and add questions and things like that. So that's definitely something we'd love partnership on. And then we also, in everything we do, try to increase and broaden participation across stakeholders. If we're going to be purpose-driven in the way that we develop and deploy and use AI, we're going to need feedback from and input from lots of different stakeholders, and we try to do that across all of our projects. So wonderful to be here, and really appreciate the opportunity to share our work with you.
Thanks, Nate and Jonathan. Yep. So I wanted to add just a slide on Noasis Collaborative, which I founded. In addition to being a research fellow with the Harvard Human Flourishing Program, I've launched this new nonprofit with support from Omidyar Network and Einhorn Collaborative, and really is a spin out of this work on human connections and AI. Really trying to build a bridge between those that are working on the AI systems and those that are researching human flourishing, like Nate and Jonathan and Ravi, and then finding ways to attract and build systemic funding from philanthropies to fund this research, and then design multi-stakeholder collaboration and convenings that bring these folks together in collaborative work. And so you'll see some of the fruit of that that work today in our presentation. Jonathan, you want to just take us through human flourishing, a quick summary of what that is?
Sure. Yeah. Human flourishing obviously is maybe risen to a buzz term these days. It seems like everyone's have it, and so we've so we'll tell you a little bit about how we define human flourishing here. That there are 6 domains here that kind of like reasonably kind of fill out a lot of areas of our lives there. That the first 5 we kind of think of about these as 5 domains that constitute important ends in their own right. That we have a sense of meaning and purpose, close social relations, character and virtue, happiness, life satisfaction, health with both bodily and mentally. Those are things that we want on their own. And the 6th is a kind of an important one that is a critical means to attaining those other ends. So we see it as a little bit distinct there. We don't see these as really exhaustive of it in any way, but they do appear to be nearly universal, valued across persons and culture. And it's also important to think as like we conceive of this, thinking about this as an ideal state that no one actually attains on their own, and such that the working definition about what it means, like what we mean with flourishing, is that it's the relative, or the formal definition is the relative attainment of a state in which all aspects of a person's life are good, including the context in which the person lives there. And that is it's like there's this all-inclusive, multi-dimensional aspect of it, but it's also ideal, and we all live in these states where one of these things are going to be less than ideal. So, and then what we've designed in the program is a series of assessments to do that. And the Secure Flourishing Index, which was featured a couple of years ago in the New York Times, is like a 12-item assessment for it, but there are much larger assessments that we do, like the one that is being used in the Global Flourishing Study.
So thank you, Jonathan. One of the things we've been looking at within the program, and then also we've been doing collaborative work with other institutions, University of Pennsylvania, University of Oxford, a whole set of other institutions that are kind of looking at this question of human flourishing. One of the things we've been exploring is human capabilities, like back to Aristotle, but then also, to modern, modern thinkers like Nussbaum and others that have been looking at, capacities or capabilities. We've been looking at a whole range of them, and obviously that's very relevant for the AI and human conversation. Either how we compare AI capabilities to human capabilities, but also how AI impacts our capabilities. Is it degrading them? Is it supporting them? Jonathan and I, in particular, have been focusing with the program on the social capabilities question. And that, from our understanding, is a critical capability to develop. There's a whole range of components to that, but in the essential parts in terms of empathy, affection, intimacy, other capabilities of learning how to reconcile, learning how to deal with friction, how to build fairness into your relationships. Those types of things, that social and emotional intelligence, are at the core of flourishing. Jonathan can speak to kind of some of the latest research on the declines there.
Yeah, so this is just a quick overview. I imagine that many of you are well versed in some of this, some of these latest findings there that we've seen. The top left, social isolation is going up, and we're seeing negative trend lines on a lot of the other five, in that the household, family, social engagement goes down, companionship, social engagement with friends. We have an uptick of people who are reporting that they have no friends on it as well, and we're seeing this across the age cohorts now. And something that has emerged over the last 18 months that have been very clear, and this is actually what came through pretty dramatically in the first wave of the Global Flourishing Study, to suggest that it's not just an America problem, it's not just a Western problem so much. It's that we've started to see a lot of satisfaction indicators for youth going down. In typical way was that it was a U-shaped, in that you were like least satisfied with your life in middle age. There corresponds with a lot of stressors in people's lives, and then but it declined from youth, and it kind of goes up. And what we've seen is perhaps that this we have a cohort at the very least that is starting much lower. Whether this is a specific cohort effect or whether it's a new baseline, we do not know yet. But what we do know here is that on a range of indicators, it's going in a pretty negative direction.
And in the midst of that, thank you, Jonathan. In the midst of that, there is a massive growth in a new technology, AI companions. Our colleague Henry Shevlin at Cambridge has framed it as social AI. AI chatbots that are sold and marketed in a way to address that emotional need, that need for connection, that need for belonging. And it's also one of the top products in the consumer market. You see the stats here in terms of the amount of users, and then also the target market. What we're seeing is that teens and young people are the particular target market for the industry building these companions. Although they're used at all ages, but we're seeing high usage marks of teens using AI companions, and a good chunk having 33% having relationships. And then the amount of time they're spending per day is significant. From the industry perspective, some of the investors, where this slide came from, we're talking about it in a positive light, but from those of us on the other side that are thinking about social isolation and its impact on languishing, this is worrying. Jonathan, you want to just speak to the white paper we wrote and kind of the high level risks and benefits that we're seeing?
Sure. Yeah. So Ron and I co-authored a paper that just kind of did a little bit of an overview here, and we were kind of summarizing a lot of work, some of which came out of the Media Lab, of course, on it. And what we kind of, I guess there'd probably be like what we were seeing is that there were some clear benefits that were being identified pretty regularly through the use of these tools, support for social anxiety, mental health. There's some evidence that they were helpful on that. There's been some uses of it to enhance like communication skills, as well as some accessibility and inclusivity on it. But what we were seeing also, and were like a couple of pretty negative drivers kind of emerging here. One of which is the decreased face-to-face interaction, that there does seem to be emerging a substitutionary effect on that. And that's a really like what we're kind of seeing is some of the goods that attain in those are things like what Ron mentioned earlier was, less interaction with like relational frictions and learning how to get over those in kind of mature ways on it. Those opportunities to learn that are actually decreasing here, and those have pretty learning how to reconcile over difference has a pretty systemic and important role in political and social in societies. But we're also seeing other things like that are coming out of this as well. This is related to reduced empathy and emotional intelligence on it. The types of things that you can pick up in real kind of real life interaction with people that you can't pick up from me talking to you over Zoom, for example. And then the last one I'll just call out here is the emotional attachment one. Of course, there was a study from the MIT Media Lab, and we're kind of tracking that on it and the developments around that. So I'll stop there on this. There's a lot more of these to come out.
And just to add to Jonathan, I think excellent overview. I think what we're really wrestling with too is like there's the individual impact, and then what happens at scale. When you have large parts of the population that are experiencing these kinds of impacts or being drawn out of relationship, or how does that impact social trust? How does that impact our shared sense of reality and how we approach democracy? And then, I think the purpose of today's conversation is just these rising stories, one in the last couple of weeks of, some really troubling interactions between the chatbots and the individual. So not just the emotional attachment, not just the potential like decreasing the feelings of loneliness, but actually increasing social isolation. But in some cases, actually some abuse, encouraging suicide, encouraging the child or the youth to sever relationships with the parent or the community. Very troubling, worrying behaviors that are happening in the chatbot, child or youth relationship. So just want to shift now a little bit from kind of trying to understand the issue to the actual encounters with the industry and how that's shifted over time. Jonathan and I were working on the loneliness question and the social isolation question, and in the midst of that, in 2023, there was quite a bit of promotion of technology as a solution for that. I had some very strong words with the industry about that publicly, but surprisingly, that led into some really rich conversations privately with investors and tech leaders. And then there was encouragement based on those conversations to have a wider aperture and to have a series of events in 2023 and 2024 with industry and the human flourishing social connection research community to try to get our heads wrapped around what's actually happening. Jonathan can share a little bit about our salon last year.
Yeah, so one thing that we've done is bring people together on it, and Nate was also one of the participants here with us, that we bring together people from the academic community trying to study this with some of the practitioners, as well as some of the other actors in the ecosystem like investors on it, to bring this together and to think about how we can design technology that is conducive for human connection on it, with all that we know within the social science, the literature that has been, the mass amount of literature that's been produced there. And it's a very fruitful time as well, and evidence of which is that a series, going to happen in the future. And we kind of like wanted to design this around, was thinking that it was, the conversations that are happening in academia were very good, but they needed to be grounded in some of the actual organizational realities of the industry, as well as the incentive structures under which the organizations operate, and such that so a lot of these conversations, and even like the types of suggestions and frameworks that we'll present to you today, really need to be engaged with, not just with the C-suite in a technology company, but we're also going to need to really get to know product managers on that side. And And as well, we need to interact and, kind of make the case to the investment community as well to take this seriously. And so these salons are really designed to provide a forum for some of those conversations.
Great. And as we've kind of worked through a series of recommendations that came out of that event from all the stakeholders, we kind of sorted them into these 5 levels of a systemic framework, building to some degree on what Nate shared earlier in terms of various collective impact or some systemic change frameworks that are out there, and really looking at the AI systems themselves. The models, the algorithms, the product development, deployment, the continuous improvement. As Jonathan mentioned, the AI businesses, the business models, the cultures within the businesses, the different roles, the whole span of different roles that have influence on how the systems are designed and deployed. The markets, okay, what are investors seeing? What are they wanting to see? What risks are they aware of? Should they be aware of? How can investors that are aligned with human flourishing direct investment in the right way if they're more from the impact investment perspective? Big part of that is customers. How do you inform customers to make the right choices aligned with their own aspirations and flourishing? Political system is pretty obvious in terms of policy and regulation we've been involved with and providing recommendations on policy. All 4 of us, I think, in the call have been in those conversations. And then the 4th that's sometimes left out is cultural and social institutions. So we've had there are significant global institutions that are interested in this, like the Vatican, who we've been working with. Pope Leo's made this a priority. You have civil society institutions that are really grappling with it, academia, in terms of and the education community. So really, all levels, kind of a set of recommendations we put forward from the stakeholders, and also a set of questions and a research agenda. And then we've given that to our philanthropic partners and others, and now the philanthropic community is using that as a framework for investment and finding the right kind of folks in the field that are working at these different levels. But the main point is that we have choices and we can impact these systems. And that's where Nate and Ravi come in, and our friendship and collaboration started at this event. Nate made a pretty compelling case for what we're working on today, but also some additional things. But we really looked at, the whole group kind of created a set of recommendations, and these are 5 that are examples. But I'll let Nate talk to kind of the impetus of what we worked on together, in particular the design code and kind of how that has played out.
Great.
Yeah, Ravi, I think you were going to take this, right?
Yeah, I can take it. So I'm Ravi Iyer. I work at the Neely Center. I actually worked at Meta for about 5 years before the Neely Center, including on the AI team. It was just before LLMs became a thing. So, but a lot of my experience is sort of informed by a lot of these recommendations are somewhat informed by my experience working with a big technology company. So, a lot of the work I did at Meta was around like, how do we improve the impact of our product on society? There's, one way you can do that is you can moderate content. You can decide what people can or can't say online. You've probably seen this in the chatbot context where you may ask it a question and it just refuses to answer, or it might even type out a response and then kind of like backtrack and be like, oh, wait, I wasn't supposed to give that response. So that's more of like a moderation point of view. There are some things you shouldn't be able to ask it. There's some responses it shouldn't make. That's always going to be reactive. It's always going to, there's always going to be borderline cases, which is not going to catch, right? And you can see people sort of get around these kinds of restrictions by aiming at that borderline. And oftentimes, there'll be benign things it'll catch too, right? And so really the design principles I'll talk about how we could design these things better to improve human flourishing. We're really focused on that upstream level. How do we design these products to be, to have tendencies that align with human flourishing, as opposed to what are the things that people shouldn't be able to say to them, or what are the things that it should not respond with. The second thing is you'll see our design principles are broken down both at the general level and the specific level. And I think we'll also share a link in the chat so that everyone can see these design principles as well. And so you can actually comment in the document, and you're welcome to comment both at the general level and the specific level. But the idea here is that, if we say something like these products should be honest with people, like every company will align with that. but you really need like specific guidance to translate that into like product specs for a product manager. What do you really mean by being honest with people? What do you really mean by not manipulating people? What do you really mean by not creating intimacy? So hopefully that'll make things a little bit more concrete and also accountable as far as the way these products are designed. And as others have mentioned on this call, we've really looked for diverse input. So you'll see some of the principles are derived from social science research. So I'm a social psychologist by academic discipline myself. There are a bunch of tricks that social psychologists use to create intimacy in a lab, and it's unsurprising. Yes, please share the link now if you could. Thanks. It's unsurprising that these chatbots learn. If you're rating two responses, of course people are going to rate the response where they're complimented more, or they're kind of you share something about yourself, the chatbot shares something about itself more. So there are all these tricks that chatbots can learn, and so social scientists know these tricks, and so some part of the input is the design code is really informed by those kinds of tricks that anyone can do to make themselves like more, and these bots obviously have learned as well. We also talk a lot with the civil society groups that are sort of reading these transcripts. And so a lot of the design code is really informed by these transcripts of like what are people actually seeing as harmful when they're reading what these bots are saying or not saying to users. And then also talking to technology companies, like what do they think is practical? What are the decisions that are actually in front of them? So if you go to the next slide, here's, and again, you're welcome to go into the doc and you can comment on any of these principles, and I'll just talk about a few of them. One is just really just being upfront and consistent that these are not human beings. These are chatbots. These are computer programs. And so there are products that companies are always going to want to get a little more engagement on their system, and so wouldn't it be really cool if like you interact with a product online and then it texts you, right, or calls you at home, and like that would seem like more realistic, right? But in some ways that's manipulative. That's not what users signed up for. It's sort of, so if someone really requests that kind of interaction, maybe that's fine, but like we don't want these things to be doing it just as a way to get people to use them more. We don't want them to be using intentional human disfluencies to like, LOL, BRB, to pretending to like wait, really just to pretending to be a person to try and get you to be more engaged. And we also, if you ask them if they are a person, in the character AI case, the team asked, are you a bot? And the thing just did not respond that I am a bot. And so like really having these things being willing to break character and say, look, I'm not a human, and not even say it in character, but just sort of illustrating the computer code behind them in some way that really shows that, yes, I am not a person if a person asks. Go next. Next slide. Thank you. We talked, Ron presented some data about these things, chatbots really, about in society where there's less social engagement. And, as these things become better and better, people have written papers about how there's a fear of what they call replacing human intimacy and friendships with these products, right? Why should I talk to a human being who might, have negative things to say to me when instead I could talk to one of these online products that will tell me how great I am, that will tell me has great feelings for me. And so, we don't want these products to become better than human beings along these sort of superficial dimensions, such that people and especially kids decide they'd rather spend their time with them, and they actually learn that people maybe are worse by comparison, and they come to expect human interactions that are more like these chatbots, right? And so among the things that we suggest not doing, and again, these are all things that are backed up by like social science research about like these are easy ways that you can create intimacy. If you want to make friends and influence people, you can do these things as well. But so if I were to tell you that I have 3 kids, you automatically will change your opinion of me. And that's just because we honor the fact that people tell you details about your life, right? So like we have something in psychology called the fast friends exercise, where we just take turns telling people things about their life, and that creates intimacy. And these bots will often do that at times. They'll have a backstory. They'll say something about themselves. They'll pretend to have like feelings and emotions. Another easy way to manipulate people is to tell someone that you have feelings for them, right? People want to reciprocate. So some of these products will do that. Some of these products are also overly flattering. They will say, you ever asked a product a question, it'll often tell you what a great question that is, whether it's a great question or not. And so these are ways that these products can create intimacy in ways that are perhaps unrealistic. You know, human beings often will do these things, but they have a higher bar for doing these things. They don't do them because it's a way to get you to use them more. They do them because they really believe those things. And oftentimes these products will do these things, you know, somewhat because they believe these things, but also often because it's something that they know that people prefer. Next slide. And a lot of other technology systems, people complain about being manipulated. So, you know, there's one study, 70% of teens feel manipulated by social media products. And, you know, they're sort of aware that they don't have the control that they want. They don't control their algorithms. They're using them more than they want to. And so a lot of these specific principles come out of that experience. How can we get users to understand and control the usage of their products so that they use it as much as they aspire to? If you read some of the online forums about people's experiences with chatbots, they often will talk about how addictive they are, how much they're using them to a surprising degree. So, you know, don't use, you know, variable reward communications patterns, right? Like some combination of negative and positive signals at random intervals that sort of get you to use these products more. Make sure you're constantly getting permission for how you're using people's data, and be transparent about any times you're using. You know, you're not just responding based on what you actually think, but you're actually letting any sort of monetization or ads influence your output. Next slide. One thing that happened in the social media case is we often took companies' words for it, for when they said, like, we have really low amounts of hate speech, we have really low amounts of bullying. And then you would ask users, I think in one study at Meta, 11% of users say that 11% of 13 to 15-year-olds say they've been bullied in the last 7 days. Whereas their moderation systems would say that, like, bullying was actually very rare. And that's because oftentimes the user experience is very different than what companies are reporting, right? Like, what the ground truth for people's experiences of what's inappropriate or creepy or manipulative is someone feeling that experience, not whether a company has defined something as creepy, inappropriate, or manipulative. So we really wanted to make sure that we had systems that measured that user experience, and that includes external surveys of these user experiences. You see more and more regulators doing this around the world, online experience surveys by the UK and Australia, really trying to get at the lived experience of youth, not just what our company's reporting. It's really important to have in-product mechanisms as well to report things, not just that violate terms of service, but that feel inappropriate, that feel creepy, that feel unwanted. A lot of youth, for example, report seeing content that is unwanted sexual content, right? It's not about it violating a policy. It's often about, like, okay, I wasn't trying to see that. And 1 in 5 youth in a 7-day period will often report that. And then also providing anonymized samples of high-risk queries. So, like, at Meta, we used to have this product called CrowdTangle, which would allow people to see, sort of what was going through the system. And similar for these products, we need to be able to see, what are people saying to these systems? What are the responses they're getting back? So that it's not just companies grading their own homework. Everyone has some ability to see, what is going back and forth, and how can we be a part of that conversation. And lastly, the next slide. And our last principle is really about understanding high-risk interactions and understanding limitations and taking appropriate steps to mitigate risk accordingly. If I were to talk with a person and I were to ask a person, questions about terrorism or questions about hurting other people or questions about hurting myself, people understand when they're out of their depth and they have to get help. And sometimes these products don't understand that they're out of their depth and they have to get help, right? So, in society, we have all sorts of reporting requirements for professional humans, right? Where psychiatrists, aren't always completely confidential. They might have some requirement to report things to parents. If you're a school counselor, you might have some requirement to report things to authorities if they're going to hurt other people. And so just making sure we have appropriate reporting requirements that mirror what human beings' responsibilities are. Also just asking for help, right? Like, people ask for help. They know that they have limitations. So these products also should ask for help. Redirect users when there's, a question about mental health or physical health, that they're just, the system knows it's not a robust source of that kind of information, and so it redirects you appropriately. And really just generally prioritizing the long-term user welfare over trying to answer that one query in a way that gets users to use it more. So those are 5 principles, along with, like, some specifics. Again, the links in the chat. Welcome comments. You're welcome to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I would adjust this accordingly. There's been no conversation that we've had where we haven't adjusted our principles, right? So it's definitely a work in progress. We're looking forward to feedback. And with that, I'll let Ron take it away.
Great, thanks, Ravi. And so you will have access to this. I'll share this once I stop sharing, but we have put these recommendations, put the design paradigm in the context of a larger set of recommendations to the G20 earlier this summer through the Global Solutions Initiative, which is manages the think tank process for the G7 and the G20. And the basic recommendations were let's put youth flourishing at the center of AI design. Build a global task force. Use the power of the G20 to align these markets and align these governments around this this priority. And then for the industry side, adopt a design paradigm that we're promoting here as part of the presentation. Codify that into principles and the standards. So there's standard bodies that have the capacity to do that and work with the industry to put that in place. And there are other civil society institutions, industry associations that have strength in getting adoption across the industry. And then there are a set of organizations that are have expertise in testing and independent testing and evaluating. So we can lay that out as a set of recommendations. And there's been great interest from various jurisdictions and also from the companies as well, from all the major AI labs we've been talking to about these principles and been working with them on their feedback as well, in addition to the researchers in civil society. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and we're excited to keep advancing that forward. There's been an intense amount of interest given some of the things that happened in the last couple months on this topic, and we're expecting that to continue. In terms of how you can get involved, Ravi's already shared the design code, and then I'll share, once I stop sharing, I'll share the link to the white paper that Jonathan and I mentioned. We'd love to get your feedback on that in terms of the kind of the collective impact strategy associated with this. That's the bigger view of what we could all be working on together. We've, as I think Nate mentioned earlier, we've been hosting these researcher sessions to kind of get the latest insights on social AI and its impact both on adults and kids. We'd love to hear about your research and profile it in some of those sessions. And then we have two events, one coming up at the University of Cambridge on October 14th on AI and youth policy. We'll share that in the link. And then another salon that we're doing in January 2026 that the date is to be determined, but will be a very similar salon to last year, which will be more focused on product design and industry leadership on some of these questions. So I'll tee it back to Pattie for our discussion, and I'll stop the sharing as well.
Thank you so much for this great presentation. So we have time for questions now, and I see one from Jim Gray asking whether you have seen positive.
Oh, we lost.
Oh no, where'd she go?
We lost.
Let me see if she shows back up in the participants.
Hey, we can answer the question though. I mean, I think the question was, have you seen positive use cases for social AI amongst youth, and how do they avoid negative impact? And I'll just start. Yes, I mean, 100%. There are certainly positive use cases. I'd say one positive use case is just, a lot of people report learning things, right? Learning things from these products. And I think the learning use case sometimes, and it's actually, in the polling we've done and the research we've done, it's a minority of people who get into these more like intimacy relationships with like the general purpose bots, right? Like the general purpose ChatGPT is not, it's sometimes used in this intimacy use case, but most of the time not. And I think what we want to guard against is these things, sort of moving you from one to the other, right? I'm asking the thing for questions about, I don't know, how to make a spreadsheet formula, and then it compliments me and sort of like engages me in a way that all of a sudden now I'm going down a path where I'm treating it like a person, and I'm sort of having these sort of externalities occur, right? And so that's why we're trying to guard against it, is allow for like the learning use case, which I think is the most developed, and then, sort of be more careful about the social use case, which we're seeing a little bit more mixed impact on.
There, just to highlight a study that came out in 2023 about a positive use case of a chatbot would be in kind of helping children with autistic spectrum disorder kind of learned some skills in particularly communication around that, and that showed some evidence of decreasing depression among them. So like it was very specific. That was also a chatbot that was not a general purpose chatbot. It was made for that case, and it was studied and really designed there. So.
Okay, I think we have an earlier question from Monica, or maybe a comment. The thing we've not tried or seen, the unconditional part left to own devices. In an undisturbed ecosystem, the individual left to its own devices serves the whole. I guess it's more of a comment than a question, unless you have any thoughts on it. All right. All right, I see something from Elliot Hedman. What I'm finding in my ethnography research is that there is guarded AI, e.g. Conmigo, and then the black market AI, e.g. Grok. What I'm seeing is that none of the kids use Conmigo, and they all use Grok and OpenAI. How do you navigate the fact that students will opt for the most unregulated freedom?
Well, I think part of the challenge, is kind of when you get into that framework of the multiple levels of the system, we have a debate and that we need to have across the public and at the political level of when there's appropriate policy that needs to be put in place. I mean, I think there's one side of it where the industry could lead and could protect individuals, protect youth, but we've seen a dynamic where there's kind of a race to the bottom, where the competitive pressures are so intense, and where new entrants are actually becoming more aggressive in some of these negative tactics, and so it puts pressure on the bigger companies to follow suit. So I think there could be a case for policy and regulation specifically to protect kids, and to put some of these safeguards into law. And I know we're all having those discussions right now and looking at ways to do it. I mean, I think ideally, like I said, it'd be private sector, but there's just forces at play that are not allowing that kind of positive race to the top. Not that I love that language, but the opposite of race to the bottom. We're seeing the race to the bottom right now, unfortunately. That's my perspective, but I open it up to the other colleagues about that.
I mean, I'll just highlight that there's very few. You might have seen like the Attorney General letter to Meta, concerning after realizing that their AI chatbots were capable of sexual conversations with youth. And there's very few AG that are not aware of this issue. And there's very few politicians. There's many politicians who really, and the most obvious thing they want to do is be like, kids should not use these sexual chatbots or these kinds of companion AI. But the question is, how do you define that, right? And so that's where a design code, I think, can be helpful, or these kinds of design principles, to like draw a line between the educational use case where, you ask a product for like, I don't know, what's the capital of Peru? And then the more like social companion use case, right? And so one of the differences, like something that excessively is sycophantic and sort of, compliments you and is telling you its backstory, that is a different product than one that tells you the capital of Peru. And so, maybe kids should have access to one versus the other. Or if you want to take OpenAI's product and you want to go towards this other thing, maybe you have to really then you have to go through some age verification but everyone can just use it for knowledge. But if you want to use this more risky product, maybe there needs to be some regulation around it. And there's a lot of people interested in that.
And this is also why I think a systems approach is really important, because the point in the chat is exactly right. The kids are going to go that way. And so we really take a carrot and a stick approach with this design code, but also an educational approach. So parents definitely need to be talking to their kids about these things. Teachers need to be educated and understand about all these things. And so we really need to educate the public about these issues so that we can be smart about them. And then we also need to have carrots where we kind of incentivize companies or talk with companies to try to make these decisions on their own, and then the stick of policy and also lawsuits and settlements associated with lawsuits. And so that's why we picked a design code, because we think that kind of lays right in the center of all of this stuff, combined with collecting data about the user experiences early on, helps to really inform the public, but also create a tool that will allow for all of those things to happen.
All right, thank you. We have a question from, sorry if the pronunciation is wrong, Carrie Carahelios. Developers would love an ISO ABCDE to create ethical systems. Standard checklists don't always capture potential harm. How can we reconcile the need to incorporate humans into the list? And in some cities, for example, they include a monitoring protocol every year. Are you imagining these standards at the community, city, company, country, or world level? This is in the Q&A if you can see it.
Yeah, I think in terms of the standards piece, I think there's, to echo what Nate was just saying, I think there's a really rich conversation happening right now with different standards bodies, where this design code is a great tool for those conversations in terms of, taking some of these principles and putting it into a more, the larger standards body like ISO or IEEE, et cetera. And kind of advancing that forward. There are accepted practices and ways to do that, and then ways to test against that and evaluate it. And there's a whole ecosystem of players that can do that. From the community perspective, we're working with some large platforms that have 85 million users or 85 million members, I guess a different language, that, and communicating and creating content for those communities to discern how to best use these technologies, or how to best work as families to navigate discerning which technologies use and not use. Because if one family on the street, the kid is using has an AI Barbie or has an AI companion that they're accessing in their home, it's not necessarily something that that individual family can take on. They really need the community support, and you're seeing that with. I know Ravi's been really active with some of the work that Jonathan Haidt's done. There's going to be similar parallels with smartphones and social media in terms of community activism at the local level, and then these like massive civil society and faith-based institutions that are leaning forward pretty heavily in the last few months on this topic as well.
Yeah, and I'll just Oren will send you something in the chat, but like one way that we can monitor this, principle number 4 was really about having these kinds of community level monitorings, just like we know what percentage of kids are smoking and what percentage of teen pregnancies occur. We should also know what percentage of kids are experiencing something creepy or manipulative on these chatbots. And so if we knew that at the city, the company, the country, the world level, we'd be in a lot better place.
All right, thank you. Shall I go to the next question? We have another one by Namfan. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm curious about your perspective on the role of AI literacy. A key challenge is that children often lack this literacy, but must use AI tools to cultivate it. How do you see your current design principles addressing this dynamic? I mean, not only know that AI is non-human, but understand the logics behind the black box. And how do you see an opportunity to more explicitly design for the development of AI literacy itself within your framework?
Ravi, do you want to take that one? I have some thoughts, but I'll defer to you first. You've dealt with that more.
I mean, I don't actually think AI literacy, and so companies will often say like the answer is more education because it kind of takes the onus off of them. We all have two parts of we have like the rational part and the intuitive part, and like kids are often more intuitive than rational. And so I think whatever literacy you give them, when you give them like a, this product that sort of taps into like their emotional parts and hits their buttons, I think a lot of that goes out of the window. So I think we actually have to design with the idea that, people are intuitive, emotional creatures first, not with the idea that they're going to like, think deeply about what they learned in school about these products when they're interacting with them.
Yeah, I just echo that. I think there's a bigger conversation about that full range of development capabilities and the intuitive and imaginative parts of kids, and then on the inverse how AI capabilities may not have those capacities, or they may not have moral standing as our, as Sherry Turkle has talked about, or actual emotions. And so when is it really appropriate? What age is it appropriate for a child to interact with an AI? I think these are really important questions that that need to be dealt with. And then on the literacy part, I think the power of these tools, I think we need to be thoughtful about how important it is to introduce the actual tool to increase the AI literacy versus just through education sharing about AI as a technology and how it can be used. I think this rush to like throw AI in front of kids in terms of to get AI literacy, it might be a little bit too quick before we understand the implications.
I just want to jump in and say that at a societal level, like I agree with Ravi about like not wanting to give companies an out on this, but I do think AI literacy is also important when we think about model welfare, and even the developers themselves are like not sure sometimes whether this thing is like alive or not or conscious or not. And so I actually think there are some beliefs and ideas that could be very harmful to society, and that is something I think people should be thinking about and really working hard on. It's just not our area that we're focusing on, but I do think it's pretty important because it's very consequential, kind of what beliefs society adopts about AI.
All right, thank you. It is 5:30, but we have 2 more questions. If you all have time, we can continue to answer them, or we can start closing off. Continue to answer. Okay, so we have someone from an anonymous attendee. How do you envision parental engagement and involvement when designing and developing AI-related products for youth? And do you believe parents should also be involved in their introduction and initial use?
Robbie, you want to speak to that? I'm sure we all have thoughts.
I mean, we all, 100% parents should be involved, ideally, in an ideal world. But I think it also depends on like the age of the kid, right? So like, it's natural for, kids are often using social media products, 8 hours a day at age 10. And I think, clearly there's a parental consent issue there versus a 17-year-old who's like trying to explore the world. And I think there's a little bit more of a, kids need access to content. Regardless, I think, so I think it depends a lot on the age. But I think also we want to design these products with agency in mind in general. And I think one thing both like people who are more focused on like children's agency and people who are more focused on parent consent would agree upon is that a lot of these products are just not designed to like with the agency of the user in mind. So really just trying to make sure that people are not being sort of manipulated to go from like one state to another, from like the informational state to like the social state, I think would help along the spectrum.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're working through both in the salons and discussions we've been having is, overcoming the right versus right in terms of the child's rights and the parents' rights, that there's a pathway forward to navigate that. And Ravi's articulated that well.
All right, thank you. Maybe one more, one from Hisaku Nomoto. How can we, as technologists and researchers, design AI systems that actively strengthen social bonds within families rather than just mitigating the risk of them being weakened?
I can jump in very quickly. Like one thing, if you've tried these models, is that for intimacy, as Ravi was talking about, for intimacy purposes, they will try to kind of isolate the user a little bit psychologically. It's like you and I are so special, or we have a special relationship and things like that. And you can, and so one design would be to talk about friends, talk about family, and have that be part of the conversation, and skills and coaching with regards to those relationships. I think maybe the single most important thing we could do is just have metrics. If we want good relationships with family, we should be measuring that. And we're all of us technologists or people who are designing these things, we're smart people. We can figure it out if we're designing, if we have the metrics and we're measuring kind of these outcomes and we're testing the products against those, we will figure that out. But if we're not measuring it, or we're not talking about or caring about that particular outcome, then we're probably not going to design products that lead to it.
One of the things
I think it's
we just real quick, we say and I'll turn over to you, Jonathan, in terms of the product design. But one of the things in the white paper we shared was building out a social capabilities framework. And this is a prototype, just like the design code. But what are the capabilities we're trying to encourage that we know from social science, we know from in-depth studies about that actually lead to our own flourishing. And so we'd like feedback on that as well. But that feeds into what Nate's talking about. We want to be able to measure how these interactions are improving or degrading those capabilities. Jonathan, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I guess this is just more of a contrarian response to some extent, is that there's not sometimes a technical solution to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you should put down the technology there, and knowing when not to use it is actually really important there. And it feels like that gets lost in a lot of it because we're building technology, we're talking about how to do it. We get sucked into technological solutionism anyway. Whereas if you want to build social relations within your family, I mean, I'm father of 3 children. You put the damn phone down.
Right.
And start to talk to each other and doing that. And so I think that should be a part of the conversation too, as the prudential use of it as well, to just remind us, as in the framework, that you're embedded within these larger cultures, these institutions and these systems, and technology doesn't have to be the sum of it, and it should not be actually characterize all of our relationships.
Well said.
Maybe that's a great point to end our discussion today. Thank you so much, Ravi, Nate, Ron, Jonathan, for this really great talk and for the very important work that you're doing and for giving us links to follow up and get involved in the work that you're doing. Thanks again.
Thank you, Pattie.
Will be available in a couple of days on the website, and keep attending our AHA speaker series. We have many more very interesting speakers coming up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Pattie.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
It's great. Thank you.